The sky above Neptune was black and silent. A cold emptiness where no human eye could see without help, but deep in its shadow something enormous was waking up. A hidden dock, the size of a small city, floated inside the ice-blue glow of the planet's rings. It had been invisible for years, masked by cloaking fields, guarded by patrols that never spoke to anyone outside the project. Today, for the first time, the secret was coming into the light. At the far end of the dock, massive steel doors rumbled open, sending vibrations through the station's walls. A slow, deliberate shape began to slide forward, and even the engineers who had worked on it for years felt a chill in their bones. It was not just a ship. It was a declaration. Every meter of its black armor seemed to drink in the light, and its towering fins made it look like a predator rising from deep water. Across the station's observation deck, silent figures stood in rows, watching it emerge. No one clapped, no one cheered. They all knew this wasn't a moment for celebration. It was a moment of war, in a cramped chamber on the opposite side. Of the dock, two figures huddled over a small device, its green light flickering as it recorded every movement of the ship. They were not human. Their pale, scaled skin caught the glow in sickly patterns, and their unblinking eyes reflected the warship like mirrors. They spoke in short bursts of clicks and hisses, their translator whispering the words in a mechanical voice too large, not possible. They cannot have built this alone. One of them leaned closer to the lens, recording the enormous cannon that ran like a spine along the warship's center. If it launches, the other hissed, the balance is broken. Our fleets will not stand. They closed the recorder and pressed a signal beacon against the wall. Somewhere light years away, in the heart of the Veil Dominion, a message raced across the stars. They have built it on the bridge of the dock. Commander Elias Vorn stood with his hands behind his back, staring at the vessel as it drifted free of its cradle. His eyes were steady, but his chest carried the weight of every hour that had brought them here. Project Goliath had been born the day the Veil burned the Martian colonies without warning, leaving 500,000 dead and the other half scattered in refugee fleets. Humanity had begged for peace. The Veil had answered with silence and blockades. It was then that Earth's Defense Council had agreed quietly, secretly, to build something that could not just defend, but dominate. No one outside a circle of 100 people even knew that dock existed. And if the Veil ever discovered it before the ship was ready, humanity's hope would end in fire. The Goliath was not just large, it was unnatural. 10 kilometers from nose to engine burn, with armor layered in a lattice of human alloys and stolen alien composites. It was heavier than any known vessel. Its heart was a reactor built from Veil blueprints. It's modified by human engineers who saw flaws the original designers had missed. The power it could channel was enough to run Earth's largest cities for centuries. And all of it was hidden inside. A machine designed to fight alone if it had to, without fleet support, without resupply, without retreat. The ship's AI, classified above all else, had been trained in war scenarios for years, learning, adapting, thinking faster than any human crew could. Elias had read its reports. He wasn't sure if he trusted it, but he knew they would need it. Inside the ship, the final systems check was underway. Engineers crawled through the engine corridors, their voices echoing against the armored walls. Weapons officers calibrated railguns longer than skyscrapers, watching readings scroll across dim screens. Deep in the reactor core, a small team in radiation suits moved with a precision born from fear. They knew that one wrong touch here wouldn't just end them. It could tear the dock apart and take half of Neptune's moons with it. Each system reported back to Ilias's bridge in short bursts. Main drive online. Shield arrays functional. Reactor at 94% output. Weapons charging. It was moving too fast. They had planned a test for weeks before the Goliath left the dock, but a shadow of urgency pressed on everyone, as if they all sensed something was coming. In a monitoring station above the dock, a communications officer frowned at her screen. Tiny flicker of static rolled across the frequency bands, then again. Stronger this time. She tapped her headset, switched channels, and felt her stomach tighten. It wasn't random noise. It was a code, one she had been trained to recognize but hoped she would never hear. She sent the data straight to Elias without saying a word. He read the translation once, then again, slower. His jaw tightened. On the display in cold red letters were two words, "They know," around Neptune's orbit, automated defense satellites turned their sensors outward. Long-range scans began sweeping the edges of the system. Somewhere out there, past Pluto's cold silence, something was moving toward them. Fast. Elias didn't call an alarm. He simply turned to the crew and said, "Double the shield charge. Ready the main gun, and lock the dock's doors." His voice was calm, but everyone on the bridge could feel the weight behind it. If the Veil had learned about Goliath, they would not wait for it to finish construction. They would come now, with everything they had, to kill it before it ever fired a shot. The warship floated fully free of the dock now, its black hull reflecting the distant sun like a shard of midnight. Inside its silent corridors, lights began to pulse, systems waking from standby to combat readiness. Elias looked once more at the display showing Neptune's orbit. Still nothing. But the code had been clear. It's somewhere the hunters were coming. And for the first time, humanity had built something that could hunt back. For almost 4 hours after the warning code arrived, the black space around Neptune remained still. The Goliath drifted just beyond the dock's shield barrier, its armor plates shimmering faintly as the energy fields held against the cold. On the bridge, the crew moved with sharp, precise motions, every sensor tuned to maximum range, every system armed. They spoke little. The air felt heavy, as if the entire station was holding its breath. Commander Elias Vorn stood near the forward viewport, his gaze locked on the tactical display. He knew what the silence meant. The Veil were already inside the system. They had learned long ago that the most dangerous approach was the quietest one. And if they were hiding, they were waiting for the moment to strike when it would cause the most damage. In the control pit below the viewport, Ensign Myra Kale leaned over her console, her eyes scanning dozens of data streams at once. She had served on patrol craft for 6 years, fought in 3 skirmishes, and seen Veil ambushes tear ships apart in under a minute. But this was different. "This was no skirmish, Commander," she said quietly. "They're masking their emissions. But I've got faint distortion at the edge of range. Looks like 30, maybe 40 signatures." Her voice was steady, but her hands were tense on the console. Elias didn't need to ask what kind of ships. The Veil didn't send scouts. In those numbers, that was a kill fleet. And they were heading straight for Neptune. The order came without hesitation. Bring the Goliath's shields to full. All secondary batteries online. Dock control. Evacuate non-essential personnel to deep core shelters. If they get through. He didn't finish the sentence. They all knew. If the Veil reached the dock, there wouldn't be a dock left to defend. Massive blast doors began sliding shut across the station, sealing corridors and locking down airlocks. Sirens stayed silent, but warning lights flashed in the hallways. Inside the Goliath, crew members strapped themselves into stations, weapon crews checking calibration one last time. The AI's voice spoke over the intercom, calm, measured, almost human. Enemy fleet approaching. Estimated time to engagement. 21 minutes. Probability of hostile boarding attempt, 78%. Recommendation: engage before enemy closes to torpedo range. The AI suggestion was sound. The Goliath's main cannon, a spinal railgun, capable of firing slugs at a third the speed of light, had been designed for long-range kills. But firing first meant revealing their position in absolute terms. It was a gamble. Elias looked at the tactical display again, watching the ghostly distortion markers creep closer. If he waited, they would close enough to swarm him. If he struck, first he could cripple their lead ships before they even fired. But if he missed, the Veil would know exactly where to aim. "Power the main gun," Elias ordered finally. "Target the largest signature in the group. Let's see if they're awake out there." The charge cycle began instantly, a deep vibration rolling through the Goliath's frame as the capacitors drew power from the reactor. Engineers deep in the ship watched gauges spike toward dangerous levels. The magnetic rails began to hum, invisible arcs of energy snapping in the air. On the forward targeting array, a glowing circle locked around a faint blip in the darkness. The enemy's command ship, Elias guessed. 10 seconds to full charge. 8, 6. Then the blip moved. Not fast, but enough. Almost as if it sensed the danger, the Vale flagship shifted in formation, sliding behind a heavier shield profile. Elias didn't care. Fire, he said. The ship's hull shuddered as the railgun launched a tungsten slug the size of a small shuttle into the black. For a brief moment, there was nothing. No flash, no beam, just the silence of space. Then, through the long-range visual feed, they saw it. A flare of white-gold light, bright enough to make some crew shield their eyes. The slug had hit. The Vale flagship's forward section crumpled inward like paper, shields tearing apart under the force. The effect on the enemy fleet was instant. Their hidden approach collapsed into open maneuvering. Engines flared to full, weapons charging. They were coming in fast now, formation breaking into attack wings. Mira's voice rose over the comms. Multiple torpedo locks. 30 inbound. The Goliath's automated point defense guns came alive, spitting streams of plasma into the dark. Tiny bursts of light-marked torpedoes detonating before they could close, but too many were still on course. The dock's shields lit up as impacts slammed against them. Ripples of blue energy spreading across the barrier. Helm, break orbit. Keep the dock between us and their main formation, Elias ordered. The Goliath's massive engines ignited, pushing the warship away from the station in a slow, deliberate turn. The enemy followed, splitting into 3 wings, trying to box them in. The AI fed firing solutions into the weapons systems, each gun crew receiving targets before the enemy ships even came into range. The Goliath's secondary batteries thundered, rapid-fire bursts tearing apart smaller attack craft. But for every one they destroyed, another seemed to take its place. In the middle of the chaos, a new alarm blared, a deep pulsing tone that silenced the bridge for a heartbeat. Mira's voice came sharp. Boarding craft inbound. They're trying to punch through the aft shield. Ilias's mind raced. The Goliath was built for long-range dominance. But in close quarters boarding fights, even the strongest hull could be overrun. Seal aft corridors. Deploy security drones. No one gives them ground, he barked. The ship shook as something massive slammed into the rear plating. Hull breach warnings flashed red across the displays. Through the internal cameras, they saw it a Vale boarding drill, its spinning head chewing through the armor like it was soft metal. Security drones rolled into position, gun ports opening. But the first wave of Vale troops was already spilling through, their armored forms. Moving with terrifying speed, inside those dark helmets, no human had ever seen a face and lived to describe it. Elias turned to the AI feed. Prioritize containment. If they take engineering, we're done. The AI's voice was still calm, acknowledged. Countermeasures. Active, you may wish to brace for internal casualties. The coldness in its tone sent a shiver through some of the crew, but there was no time to argue. The enemy was inside. The corridors of the Goliath became a war zone in seconds. The first Vale squad spilled through the breach like black oil, their armor reflecting the flashing emergency lights, weapons spitting blue arcs that burned holes straight through metal. Bulkheads. The ship's internal defenses roared to life, security drones rolling out from hidden alcoves, the rotary cannons hammering the intruders in a deafening storm of fire. The first to Vale were cut down instantly, their bodies slamming against the walls, but the rest pressed forward without hesitation. They moved with an unnerving precision, covering each other as they advanced, their shots cutting down drones one by one. Engineering Chief Arden Vale was already in the fight. He and his damage control team had abandoned their toolkits for rifles. Forming a defensive line just outside the main reactor chamber, the air smelled of ozone and burning insulation. Hold the line, Arden bellowed, firing into the narrow corridor as the Vale advanced. Sparks showered from the ceiling as stray shots struck conduits. Behind him, the reactor's containment. Field hummed a reminder that one wrong hit could turn the entire rear section of the ship into molten wreckage. Up on the bridge, Elias tracked the fight through the internal cams. The display was chaotic flashes of light, muzzle flare, smoke drifting through zero-gravity pockets where the artificial gravity had failed. Outside, the Goliath was still taking fire. The tactical overlay showed 3 enemy destroyers circling, like predators, their torpedoes slamming into the ship's aft shields. The AI's voice cut through the noise. Recommendation: allocate to heavy batteries to rear quadrant to relieve pressure on engineering section. Elias didn't hesitate. Do it, and patch me to Vale. The comlink crackled to life, Vale's voice hoarse and urgent. We're holding them back, but they're trying to flank us through the vent crawl space. Elias's jaw tightened. Seal it with plasma. Don't let them inside. Understood, Vale replied, and a moment later the feed showed a flash of white-blue flame erupting through the narrow vents, cooking whatever was inside. But the Vale were relentless. A second boarding craft had latched onto the Goliath's dorsal side, just 3 decks down from the bridge. Mira's sensors picked it up first. Commander, they're going for command access. They want the ship's brain, is the implication. Was clear, if the Vale could hack or destroy the AI core, they could cripple the Goliath's systems entirely. Elias activated the ship-wide channel. All hands, Section Delta is compromised. Bridge teams, arm yourselves. We hold this. Deck, or we die here. The sound of gunfire was already echoing down the forward corridors. Officers who had never fired in combat before crouched behind barricades of overturned consoles and cargo crates. The deck trembled as the dorsal boarding drill punched through the hull, molten metal dripping onto the floor like rain. Then the breach exploded inward and the Vale charged. They were taller than humans, their armor curved and angular like the carapace of some deep-ocean predator. In the flashing lights, their movements seemed unnatural, too fast, too fluid. Lieutenant Rhea Solis, the bridge's tactical officer, was the first to fire. Her burst caught one in the chest, but its armor only sparked. The creature kept coming until Mira put 3 more rounds into the same spot, finally dropping it. Another vaulted over its fallen comrade. Landing so close, Rhea had to jam her rifle into its chest and pull the trigger point blank. The recoil slammed her shoulder as the Vale collapsed at her feet. Elias moved through the chaos with cold focus, firing controlled bursts, shouting orders between shots. Keep them out of the core access. He knew the AI was running counter-hacking measures even as the battle raged, but if the Vale got physical access, software wouldn't matter. One of the intruders hurled an explosive sphere down the corridor, a shatter charge. Elias dove behind a console as the blast ripped through the barricade, throwing 2 crewmen into the wall with bone-breaking force. Outside, the battle was tilting. The Goliath's long-range cannons had crippled 2 enemy frigates, but the destroyers were closing in, their hull plating glowing from the heat of their own weapons. The dock's defense batteries were firing too, but they couldn't cover every vector. Mira, still firing from behind a scorched console, shouted over the din, shields at 30%. We can't take another concentrated volley. On the lower decks, Vale's team was pushed back, step by step. The Vale were adapting, their shots more precise, their movements more unpredictable. Arden felt a searing pain in his side as a plasma bolt grazed him, burning straight through his armor plate. He fell to one knee, but kept firing, refusing to give ground. A drone exploded beside him, showering the corridor with shrapnel. Over the cum, he heard Elias's voice. Vale, status. His reply was ragged but firm, still breathing, still fighting.
Down.
Then came the sound no one wanted to hear, the AI's voice, still calm but edged with urgency. Warning. Enemy forces approaching reactor containment. If breach occurs, catastrophic failure will follow within 30 seconds. Suggest immediate counterassault. Elias's blood ran cold. If the Vale got that far, the Goliath wouldn't just be crippled, it would be vaporized. He made the call instantly. Mira, you have the bridge. Rhea, with me. We're going to engineering. He grabbed a pulse rifle from the weapons rack and sprinted down the corridor, Rhea close behind. The ship rocked violently as another torpedo hit, sending crews sprawling. Elias barely kept his footing, slamming a hand against the bulkhead as they ran. They passed two medics carrying a wounded officer on a stretcher, his armor melted and smoking. The look in his eyes said he knew he wouldn't see the next minute. By the time they reached the lower decks, the fight was desperate. The corridor. 2 engineering was littered with wreckage and bodies, human and Vale alike. Vale was still on his feet, his armor scorched black, firing single precise shots that dropped enemies one by one. Elias and Rhea joined the line, their rifles roaring. The Vale pushed hard, but the sudden reinforcement broke their momentum. One by one, they fell, their armored bodies collapsing into the smoke-filled corridor. When the last one dropped, there was no cheer. Just the sound of ragged breathing, the low hum of the reactor, and the distant echo of weapons fire from other parts of the ship. Elias met Vale's eyes. "We hold here. No matter what happens outside, they don't get the core." Vale gave a grim nod, reloading his rifle with shaking hands. But even as they caught their breath, the Eos voice returned. "Commander, enemy capital ship moving into position. Probability of sustained survival without immediate retreat, less than 12%. Outside, the shadow of the Vale flagship loomed larger, blocking the stars. The battle wasn't over. It was only about to get worse. The news spread across the galaxy like fire and dry grass, fast, uncontrollable, and dangerous. In the quiet dark between the stars, empires that had once thought of humanity as a minor player suddenly began pulling their fleets into defensive formations, trade ships rerouted, border patrols doubled. Even in the farthest corners of charted space, old admirals and warlords started whispering the same name, Atlas. No official record confirmed its existence. But too many eyes had seen the same terrifying thing. A single human warship, impossibly large and moving with predatory grace. It destroyed a Varkon fleet in under 4 minutes. Not crippled, not forced to retreat, erased. Those who had fought in the First Galactic War remembered that no single ship had ever been able to do such a thing, not even the ancient Drax dreadnoughts. Yet here it was, flying under no official banner, with no transponder code, leaving only wreckage in its wake, in the shadowed war rooms of the Valari Dominion. Commander Kesverawan stared at the holographic replay again and again. The footage was grainy, caught by a distant drone, but every frame chilled him. The Atlas didn't move like a warship. It moved like a predator, hunting with purpose. "This is not a sanctioned craft," said the Dominion's intelligence minister, his voice tight with fear. "No registry, no design records. Humans should not have the resources to build this." Kes said nothing, his mind turning over an older rumor one he had dismissed years ago about a human weapons project called Ghost Forge. Back then it had been laughed off as fantasy. Now he wasn't so sure. On Earth, Admiral Clark was reading the same reports in the secure command chamber beneath the North Atlantic Alliance headquarters. The walls were thick enough to block out all signals, but nothing could block the heavy silence after the drone footage ended. Round the table sat senior officers and political leaders, their expressions a mix of awe and dread. Clark leaned forward, his voice calm but carrying weight. "They've seen her. That changes everything. The Atlas is no longer a ghost. She's a message." Some of the politicians bristled. A message to whom? One asked. Clark's gaze was steady. To everyone. To every race that ever thought Earth would be easy prey. They're about to rethink the rules. But not all were convinced this was a victory. The Atlas was a weapon built in violation of every interstellar treaty humanity had signed. If the Galactic Council learned Earth had engineered such a warship, in secret, the political fallout could be catastrophic blockades, sanctions, maybe even a united war against humanity. That was why the Atlas had never been officially acknowledged. That was why, until now, it had only operated in shadows. But the Varkon fleet had attacked a human colony transport without warning, and the Atlas had responded. She had saved over 4,000 lives. And in doing so, she had revealed herself to the galaxy. Meanwhile, in the debris field of the destroyed Varkan fleet, Scavenger ships dared to pick through the wreckage. One crew, a mix of alien outcasts, found something strange, a shard of armor unlike anything they had ever seen. It was smooth, black, and nearly weightless, but their scan said it was denser than neutron steel. They tried to cut it, but their plasma saws burned out in seconds. When word of the find reached the black markets on Coro Prime, the price for even a sliver of Atlas metal skyrocketed. Whoever controlled this technology could rewrite the balance of power. In the darkness of deep space, far from trade lanes, the Atlas herself drifted silently. Inside, Captain Alina Ward stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the holographic star map. She knew the galaxy was hunting them now. Every major power would send fleets, spies, and assassins to find and destroy her ship. But she also knew that they couldn't hide forever. Somewhere out there, someone had leaked their coordinates to the Varkon fleet, and Alina wanted to know who. The Atlas had enemies, but now it might also have a traitor. And as the next set of orders came through the encrypted channel, Elena's jaw tightened. Their next mission was not to run or hide. It was to go straight into Dominion territory, where whispers said the Volari were building something meant to counter the Atlas. The crew didn't know if it was true, but they all understood the risk. This wouldn't be another shadow operation. This would be war. In the black void between stars, the Atlas streaked forward like a silent blade, its dark halls swallowing starlight. The crew moved through the ship with quiet precision, each step echoing the tension that had settled over them. They knew this mission was different. The Volari Dominion wasn't just another hostile power, it was one of the galaxy's oldest military civilizations, with fleets that had crushed entire planetary rebellions. And now, if the rumors were true, they were building something too. Challenge the Atlas. That meant this operation wasn't about defense anymore. It was about striking first, before the enemy could match their strength. Captain Alina Ward stood on the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back. The holographic projection of their route pulsed in front of her, a thin red line cutting deep into enemy space. "We enter their detection grid in 9 hours," reported Lieutenant Kai Mercer from the navigation console. His voice was steady, but his jaw was tight. "Once we're inside, stealth won't matter. They'll know we're coming," Alina nodded without looking at him. "Good. Let them know." The room went still. Normally, their strategy was to remain unseen until the moment they struck, but this time was different. This time, she wanted the Volari to feel the approach of the Atlas, to dread it, to make mistakes before the first shot was even fired. In the war room below deck, Tactical Officer Juno Reyes studied a three-dimensional render of their target, a vast shipyard orbiting the gas giant Zeron. It was heavily defended, with layers of shield satellites, missile arrays, and 6 cruiser-class warships patrolling in constant rotation. But what caught Juno's eye was the massive dry dock at the center. Inside was something huge, wrapped in scaffolding and shielded from scans. "If they finish whatever that is," she said to the assembled officers, "we could lose our advantage. This isn't just a preemptive strike, it's survival." The crew exchanged glances. Everyone on the Atlas knew the stakes, but saying it out loud made the weight of the mission sink deeper into their bones. Meanwhile, far across the sector, the Volari High Command had already detected the Atlas's approach. In a fortified command, stationed above the frozen world of Krevos, Commander Kesvaruin studied the incoming trajectory with cold satisfaction. "So they finally revealed themselves," he murmured. His adjutants shifted uneasily. "Shall we deploy the interceptor fleets?" one asked. Kes shook his head. "No. Let them come closer. Let them believe they can reach Zarin without resistance." A slow smile crept across his face. "We've been preparing for this moment." He turned to the tactical display and entered a command code. Across the Dominion's border systems, hidden defense fleets began to move into position, ready to close the trap. Back on the Atlas, the crew prepared for battle. Engineers reinforced the ship's quantum shielding, while gunners calibrated the rail cannons to maximum velocity. In the hangar bay, fighter pilots ran silent diagnostics, checking every circuit as if their lives depended on it because they did. The air was filled with a hum of focused activity, But beneath it all was a deeper rhythm, a silent pulse of shared determination. No one on board doubted what the Atlas was capable of. They had seen what it could do to entire fleets. But this time, they would be flying straight into the jaws of a power that had been waiting for them. As the ship neared Valari space, strange readings began to flash on the sensors. A massive gravitational disturbance ahead. "Not natural," muttered Chief Science Officer Dr. Harrow. "That's an artificial singularity generator. They're trying to pull us out of FTL." Elena's eyes narrowed. "Reverse it. Give them nothing." Harrow's fingers flew across the console, countering. The gravitational field with a pulse from the Atlas's own experimental drive core. The ship shuddered, the stars outside warping for a moment, and then they broke free, slipping past the trap. On the Valari command station, Kesvaroon's smile faded. The singularity field had failed. Somehow the Atlas had escaped it. "Prepare. The next phase," he ordered sharply. "They will not reach Zeron intact." But as the Atlas cleared the trap zone, Juno's scanners picked up something chilling. Not one enemy fleet, 3, moving in coordinated formation, converging from different vectors. The Valari weren't just waiting at the shipyard. They were already here, closing in fast. And somewhere in the shadows of those fleets was a ship unlike any other, a prototype that, according to intelligence whispers, was built for one purpose: to kill the Atlas. Alina looked at the holographic projection of the incoming fleets, her jaw set. "All hands to battle stations," she said quietly, but the words carried like a gunshot through the ship's comms. "We hold the line. No one builds a weapon that can challenge us."
Atlas!
The Atlas's engines roared as the crew prepared for the fight that could decide whether humanity's most dangerous warship remained a legend or became a burning wreck drifting in enemy space. The 3 Valari fleets closed in like a tightening noose, their warships moving with the kind of precision only centuries of warfare could teach. In the void, their formation looked like a dark, jagged crown around the Atlas. Every ship was armed to the teeth, missile bays bristling, energy cannons charged, shield matrices glowing faint blue against the black. But it wasn't their numbers that sent a chill down the crew's spines. It was the massive silhouette hiding behind the central fleet, drifting slowly forward like a predator revealing itself. It was enormous, longer than any battleship humanity had ever built. With a hull that gleamed with a strange metallic sheen. "Contact confirmed." Juno's voice was sharp over the comms. "That's no standard warship. It matches none of our known intel. Whatever it is, it's built for us." Silence fell on the bridge for a heartbeat. Everyone understood what she meant. The Valari had studied the Atlas. They had prepared for this day. And now, here it was, their answer to humanity's most feared ship. Captain Alina Ward's gaze stayed locked on the beast ahead. Weapons online. "Target their formation, first cut the escort apart before they can trap us." On her order, the Atlas's main rail cannons fired. Slugs of dense metal screamed across the void, punching through the shields of the nearest Valari cruiser and tearing it in half. The blast lit up the darkness, but the enemy didn't flinch. They surged forward, cannons blazing. The first volley hit hard. The Atlas's shields flared bright, their edges warping from the sheer force of the impact. Crew members were thrown against consoles, alarms screaming. Lena gripped the edge of her chair, barking orders. "Stabilize shields. Turn fire focus on their flanks." Fighter squadrons launched from the hangar in streaks of blue light, weaving through the chaos and tearing into the enemy's smaller ships. But the Valari pressed in relentlessly, forcing the Atlas into tighter maneuvers. And then the massive prototype warship made its move. Engines igniting with a deep crimson glow, it surged forward with impossible speed for its size. A beam of concentrated energy erupted from its forward array, slamming into the Atlas's shields. The deck shook violently. "Shields down to 70%, Kai shouted. "If that thing fires again, we won't last long." Elena's eyes flicked at Juno. "Target its weapon array. Disable it now."
Atlas
swung around rail. Cannons locking on, but the enemy warship seemed to anticipate every move. It shifted position, using the smaller Valari ships as living shields. Every second they hesitated, the Valari prototype crept closer. On the Valari flagship, Commander Kesvaruin watched the battle unfold, his expression cold and certain. "This is the end of their legend," he said quietly. "No one defies the Dominion twice." His officers nodded, the hum of their weapons charging again filling the bridge. But deep inside the Atlas, in Engineering Bay 3, Chief Engineer Mara Vance was preparing something dangerous. She had studied the Valari weapon's energy signature and realized its charging cycle left it vulnerable for a fraction of a second, barely enough to exploit. But it was all they had. "Tell the captain," she said into her cum, her voice steady. "Can pierce it, but she'll have to get us in close. And I mean knife fight close." The plan was madness. The Atlas was built for overwhelming firepower, not for slipping. Within striking range of a ship twice its size, "Helm, take us in," she ordered. The crew stared, but no one argued. The Atlas roared forward, weaving through enemy fire, its hull screaming under the strain. Valari cruisers tried to block the path, but the Atlas cut them down in brutal surgical bursts. The massive prototype loomed ahead, charging its beam again. Inside the Atlas, power was rerouted from almost every system into the main rail cannon. Lights flickered, gravity faltered, and the crew braced themselves. "Now," Mara shouted. At that exact moment, the Valari beam began to fire, but the Atlas's rail cannon struck first, punching straight into the glowing weapon core. The enemy's shot erupted mid-charge, detonating with a shockwave that ripped through the prototype's front section. The blast blinded sensors for a full 3 seconds. When the haze cleared, the Valari prototype was crippled, drifting its forward, whole in ruins. The surrounding enemy fleets wavered. Some ships began retreating, others fighting more desperately. Alina didn't give them a chance to regroup. "Press the attack. Leave nothing standing." For the next 13 minutes, the Atlas tore through the Valari lines. When it was over, the space above Zarin was littered with wreckage. The crippled prototype was still drifting, sparks flickering from its wounds. Alina watched it on the view screen for a long moment before turning away. "They'll rebuild," she said quietly. "But so will we. And the next time, we'll know exactly what's coming for them." The Atlas turned away from the battlefield, its engines burning bright against the darkness. The warship they swore never existed had once again lived. Up to its legend, but now, the galaxy knew humanity's power was no myth.